My name is Evelyn Hayes, and I was 32 when my father ordered two security guards to remove me from our family's Miami penthouse at 11:47 on Christmas Eve. 60 guests watched as I refused the marriage proposal my parents had arranged with a business partner's son. My father lifted his glass and said, "You'll destroy this family's future for love? Love doesn't pay for penthouses." Before I could answer, my mother struck me across the face. Then my father pointed toward the private elevator. "I have no daughter." My older sister stepped closer, poured champagne over my shoes and smiled. "Merry Christmas, nobody." The guards took my arms as if I had trespassed inside the home whose bills I had quietly helped cover for years. I did not cry, argue, or ask anyone to defend me. I entered the elevator, watched the gold doors close, and understood that my family believed they had erased me in front of everyone who mattered. What they did not understand was that nearly everything they depended on was still connected to me. On February 9th, my phone displayed 89 missed calls. My father demanded access to corporate accounts, aircraft, credit cards, and internal systems. My mother begged me to save the family. My sister insisted I had made my point. When I finally answered, my father skipped the apology and said, "Whatever happened, family loyalty comes first." I looked across a borrowed conference room and replied, "I don't have a family." Then I ended the call and blocked the number without hesitation. 3 years earlier, my father still introduced me as the daughter who kept the company organized. His name was Douglas Hayes, and my grandmother had built Hayes Atlantic Aviation from a two-plane operation. My father called himself the visionary who expanded it. I was the person who prevented his vision from collapsing under missed inspections, angry clients, and unpaid vendors. My official title was Director of Flight Operations and Corporate Compliance. I coordinated crews, approved maintenance schedules, negotiated hangar leases, renewed insurance, handled client contracts, monitored fuel agreements, and designed hurricane evacuation plans for 28 aircraft. If a customer needed a jet in Nassau within 2 hours, I found a legal crew and a safe route. If a tropical storm moved toward South Florida, I relocated our fleet before my father finished discussing how the crisis might affect our brand. Most employees called me before they called him, because I answered with solutions instead of speeches. My mother, Colleen Hayes, chaired the Hayes Horizons Foundation, generously funded by the company. She enjoyed telling donors that both daughters carried the family legacy. My older sister, Whitney Hayes, was chief brand officer. She approved photographs, hosted charity dinners, and appeared beside aircraft she couldn't identify. She also used company jets for weekends in Aspen, Manhattan, and the Bahamas. When a campaign succeeded, she accepted the applause. When it failed, she blamed restrictions from my department. My parents considered her the golden child, because she looked effortless in every room where appearances mattered. I had been dating Nathan Reed for 2 years. Nathan coordinated emergency logistics for Miami-Dade County. He earned a salary, lived within his means, and remained unimpressed by private jets or society invitations. My father disliked him because Nathan offered no merger, no influential surname, no path to a larger balance sheet. Douglas once told me love was acceptable only when it improved a family's position. I told him I was a person, not an acquisition target. He asked whether Nathan could provide the life I was accustomed to. I reminded him I was the one helping provide that life for everyone else. The pressure changed when Russell Lawson proposed selling Lawson Aero Maintenance to our company. Russell owned repair facilities throughout Florida and Georgia. His son Derek Lawson served as a vice president and had the polished manners my parents associated with suitability. Business dinners quickly became family dinners. My mother discussed wedding venues without asking whether I wanted a wedding. Whitney joked that our engagement photos would dominate Miami society pages. My father was more direct. A marriage between Derek and me, he said, would reassure lenders that both businesses were permanently aligned. Derek found me alone after one dinner and admitted he wanted no part of the arrangement. He did not love me, and I did not love him. Russell had threatened to remove him from the company if he refused. I told Derek that private discomfort wouldn't protect either of us if he cooperated publicly. He said he understood, though fear still controlled most of his decisions. Around that time, my grandmother Marilyn Hayes died. During the estate review, corporate attorney Dana Brooks explained that Marilyn had left me 39% of Hayes Atlantic Aviation. She had also appointed me trustee of a 15% employee voting trust, created to protect pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, and support staff from decisions that threaten their jobs or benefits, to be voted independently whenever employee interests or company stability were at risk. Together, my shares and the trust represented 54%. I told no one in my family. Instead, I began preserving contracts, board minutes, lender messages, and every draft connected to the pending acquisition. Several documents referenced obligations that had never reached operational review. Others assumed approvals the board hadn't granted. The proposed marriage began to look less like social ambition, and more like a device meant to bind my vote to Derek's family. By December, the pressure had become relentless. My mother treated the proposal as a social event. Whitney suggested I marry Derek publicly and keep seeing Nathan privately, as if dishonesty were practical advice. I refused every version of the plan. On Christmas Eve afternoon, my father placed a velvet ring box on his desk and pushed it toward me. "Derek will propose at midnight," he said. "You will say yes." I told him he had confused my life with a financing strategy. He leaned back, certain resistance would disappear once guests arrived. Then revealed that a photographer and several reporters had already been invited to witness the announcement. By 5 p.m., the engagement announcement had already been printed. I found a copy on the console table outside my father's study. It described the match as a mutual decision between two families united by love, shared values, and commitment to the future of private aviation. A quotation attributed to me claimed marrying Derek would honor my grandmother's legacy. I had never said any of it. Derek arrived before the guests and asked to speak privately. Russell had prepared merger documents for signature immediately after the proposal. One draft referred to the post-marital alignment of controlling family interests. I asked Derek whether he intended to go through with the performance. He admitted Russell had threatened his position, his inheritance, his access to the company. Then he looked at the ring box in his hand and said, "I won't propose tonight." I told him refusing in private would accomplish nothing if our fathers announced the engagement anyway. He'd have to speak where everyone could hear him. He hesitated, then agreed. Nathan hadn't been invited. My mother claimed the reception was limited to family, investors, and close associates, though 60 guests filled the penthouse. She ordered me to replace my dark green dress with a silver one, because silver would photograph better beside Derek's tuxedo. I kept the green dress. Whitney moved among the guests, telling them the night would include a historic family announcement. She'd selected a hashtag and arranged a backdrop bearing both company logos. At 11:30, my father began the midnight toast early. He stood beneath the Christmas tree and spoke about legacy, continuity, sacrifice, the duty of children to protect what previous generations had created. Russell stood beside him with the satisfied expression of a man waiting for a transaction to close. My father raised his glass and announced that Hayes Atlantic Aviation and Lawson Aero Maintenance would soon be joined, not only in business, but in family. Before he could call Derek forward, I stepped into the center of the room. "There is no engagement," I said. "I have not agreed to marry anyone, and I will not be exchanged for financing." My father ordered me to stop. I continued, "No wedding could serve as collateral for an acquisition, and no press statement had been authorized in my name. Russell accused me of humiliating both families, and called my behavior unstable." Then Derek moved away from his father. "Mallory, Evelyn is telling the truth," he said. "We never agreed to marry. The announcement was prepared without our consent." The room changed instantly. Guests lowered their glasses. One reporter began typing on her phone. Another asked whether the merger had received board approval. My father's carefully arranged celebration collapsed in under 2 minutes. The confrontation that followed ended with my mother's hand across my face, Whitney's champagne on my shoes, and my father ordering security to remove me. When the elevator reached the lobby, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. I picked it up but didn't call Nathan. My father would portray the whole conflict as a romantic rebellion, and blame him for turning me against the family. I needed the next decision to belong entirely to me. I booked a small room near Miami International Airport. From the desk beside the window, I opened my laptop and contacted Dana. I sent her the preserved acquisition drafts, lender emails, expense records, board minutes, the false press statement, and a timeline of every request I'd refused. She called 12 minutes later and confirmed the employee trust could act independently whenever jobs, benefits, or company solvency faced a credible threat. Combined with my shares, I could call an emergency board meeting as the controlling voter. At 2:17 on Christmas morning, I submitted a motion requesting temporary suspension of my father's, mother's, and sister's company access, pending an independent audit. Employee payroll would continue. Aircraft maintenance, insurance, fuel contracts, client deposits, crew schedules, and active flights would remain untouched. No worker would lose income because my family had tried to purchase my obedience. I also requested preservation of all records and a hold on non-essential transfers. Before sending it, I stared at my father's name on the authorization list. Removing it felt less like revenge than closing a door he had assumed would always remain open. At 8 the next morning, Dana joined the board call with Marilyn Hayes's original trust agreement open in front of her. My father appeared in yesterday's shirt, looking more insulted than exhausted. 3 independent directors, the CFO, and the employee trust representative attended. Dana explained the ownership structure without raising her voice. I held 39% directly, and as trustee I controlled the employee trust's 15% whenever company stability, jobs, or protected benefits were materially threatened. My father interrupted, insisting the trust had always been intended to support his leadership. Dana read the provision aloud. The trustee was required to act independently and could oppose any officer, director, or shareholder whose conduct created a foreseeable risk to employees. 39 plus 15 gave me 54% of the voting power. My father called the meeting retaliation, said I was emotional after an embarrassing romantic dispute, and too inexperienced to understand the consequences of freezing executive access. I shared the date stamps on the files I'd preserved and the preliminary audit request I drafted 6 days before Christmas. Proof I'd begun investigating the acquisition before the reception. Then I presented corporate card charges for Whitney's personal travel, penthouse maintenance recorded as executive hospitality, foundation events unrelated to aviation, and private aircraft use that had never received formal approval. I wasn't asking for permanent removal, a limited independent audit, temporary suspension of signing authority, and protection of operational funds until the board understood the exposure. I wasn't asking the company to punish my family for rejecting me. I was asking it to verify whether they'd treated corporate property as an extension of their personal lives. The first vote suspended my father's and Whitney's signing authority. The second froze my mother's foundation card, since company money passed through it. The third prohibited personal use of aircraft until the audit concluded. Their access to executive banking portals, fleet scheduling, fuel accounts, and vendor approvals was disabled before the call ended. My father stared into the camera as each motion passed. For the first time, someone had forced him to hear that being my father did not make him the owner of my judgment. Then I went to work, approved the morning charter schedule, confirmed crew duty limits, released maintenance payments, called 2 worried aircraft owners personally. By noon, every scheduled flight had departed or been safely rescheduled. Nathan arrived at the hotel that afternoon with coffee and a clean sweater. He didn't tell me to forgive my family, and he didn't encourage me to destroy them. He sat across from me and asked, "Are you protecting the company, or are you trying to make them hurt?" "Both," I admitted. The answer embarrassed me because it was true. Then decide which one controls your next move. I promised employees would never become collateral damage, even if my family had tried to make me collateral in their deal. The messages started before sunset. My father threatened to remove me for insubordination. My mother called the slap an emotional mistake, without apologizing, describing the pressure she'd faced as though pressure had moved her hand. Whitney said the champagne had been a joke and accused me of destroying Christmas over hurt feelings. None of them asked whether I was safe or where I was sleeping. Russell pressured Derek to deny what happened. Derek refused, and sent me copies of emails exchanged between Russell and my father, several connecting the proposed engagement to lender confidence. One lender had asked whether the family alignment event, would occur before final credit approval. My father filed a shareholder action seeking immediate restoration of his authority, describing me as a disgruntled daughter abusing a technical provision. Dana answered with the trust agreement, audit order, payroll records, continuity reports, and proof that every client operation remained stable. 2 days later, the board voted to continue my father's suspension until the audit was complete. By January 10th, the audit had moved past restaurant charges and private flights. Company money had paid for penthouse maintenance, Whitney's luxury travel, and foundation events that gave my mother publicity, but produced almost no measurable value for the company. Serious enough to require repayment and tighter controls, not enough to destroy the company. The real danger was buried inside the loss and acquisition files. My father had signed a side agreement promising Hayes Atlantic would purchase several underperforming maintenance contracts as part of the deal. Contracts carrying unresolved claims, expensive equipment obligations, facilities requiring major upgrades, publicly described as growth opportunities, but projected internally to drain our cash reserves for years. A second document was worse. It anticipated that, after marrying Derek, I would sign a personal guarantee supporting a bridge facility connected to the acquisition. My shares, my influence over the trust, my future distributions would reassure the lender. I had never approved it. I had never even seen the draft. The wedding hadn't been designed to celebrate an alliance. It was designed to place me inside a legal and emotional structure where refusing later could be portrayed as betraying my husband, my parents, and the company all at once. Derek confirmed Russell had discussed the arrangement with him and forwarded every relevant email to Dana, knowing it could end his career with his father. One message from Russell referred to me as the stabilizing asset. Another said my signature would be easier to obtain after the families were publicly joined. Reading those words removed the last possibility that I'd misunderstood their intentions. Russell canceled the acquisition and issued a statement blaming leadership instability at Hayes Atlantic. I didn't attack him publicly. Through the board, I released a factual notice confirming operations were normal and that the company wouldn't assume unapproved liabilities. Investors demanded reassurance, so I met them with numbers instead of family accusations. Every scheduled flight was operating. Client deposits remained protected. Insurance was current. Payroll had cleared. We had healthy contracts and strong customer retention, with no reason to absorb failing facilities simply because two fathers had planned a wedding. My father's emergency request for restored authority was denied. Then the consequences reached the penthouse. He'd pledged it as collateral for a personal bridge loan, expecting company distributions to cover the payments. With distributions paused during the audit, the loan became urgent. My mother finally understood the home she'd used as proof of family success might have to be sold. Her foundation faced a governance review after investigators questioned company-funded galas, travel, and consulting contracts. Whitney lost her salary, leased vehicle, travel account, and aircraft privileges. She called asking for $75,000 to cover credit cards, deposits, and event commitments. I refused and gave her the contact information for a financial counselor instead. She accused me of enjoying the family's collapse. Nathan reminded me that refusing to rescue someone from the consequences of her choices was not the same as causing those consequences. I repeated that sentence whenever guilt tried to disguise itself as responsibility. To strengthen the business, I authorized the sale of an underused corporate aircraft that cost more to maintain than it generated. The proceeds increased reserves, protected payroll, reassured our insurers. No employee lost a paycheck. No client lost a deposit. Then the auditors found an electronic guarantee bearing my signature. The timestamp placed it on a night I'd been supervising a hurricane relocation in Orlando. I had never signed it, approved it, or authorized anyone to sign for me. What began as a governance dispute had become evidence of possible fraud. On February 9th, 47 days after Christmas Eve, the missed call counter reached 89. The calls no longer came mainly from attorneys. They came from my father, my mother, and Whitney. My father offered me the official CEO title if I restored his access. My mother said the penthouse was at risk and asked me to remember birthdays, holiday mornings, family photographs taken there. Whitney said credit card companies were threatening lawsuits and claimed I had already punished her enough. Not one of them began with a direct apology. My father complained about frozen accounts before mentioning me. My mother worried that friends would learn the penthouse loan was in trouble. Whitney sent photographs of past Christmas parties. "You're going to erase all of this?" None asked what it felt like to be escorted into the street. None acknowledged the fabricated engagement or the guarantee carrying my signature. Their urgency grew only when the consequences reached their own doors. By the 89th call, I understood. They didn't miss their daughter or sister. They missed the access attached to my name. I agreed to one meeting at Dana's office. My father arrived with counsel. My mother and Whitney came without attorneys, perhaps believing emotion would accomplish what legal arguments hadn't. My mother spoke first, said she regretted how Christmas had looked, then added that I had provoked everyone by embarrassing the family publicly. Whitney apologized for the champagne and immediately asked when her salary, vehicle, and travel benefits would be restored. Their apologies were requests wearing polite language. My father waited until they finished. "This company cannot survive without family unity," he said. I asked whether he still believed I had destroyed the family's future for love. He avoided answering, and instead offered public recognition. The CEO title, complete operational authority, presented as gifts, though I already performed the work and controlled the votes that made the authority real. Dana placed the proposed settlement on the table. My father would resign as chairman, sell a defined portion of his shares at an independently appraised value, and repay documented personal expenses. Whitney would resign and sign a repayment agreement. My mother would relinquish control of the foundation. All three would release claims against the employee trust. In exchange, the company would pursue a structured civil resolution while preserving its rights concerning the false signature. My father pushed the papers away. A daughter does not dictate terms to her father. "You said you had no daughter," I replied. His expression changed. He softened his voice and said blood could not be erased by one terrible night, as though Christmas Eve had been an isolated mistake instead of the moment their private beliefs became visible to everyone. My mother began crying. Whitney called me cold. My father said loyalty required compromise, and reminded me that everything he had built would eventually belong to his children. "I don't have a family," I said. The words didn't feel triumphant. They felt final. He refused to sign and walked out. In the hallway, his own attorney warned him that the trust documents, lender emails, audit findings, and signature evidence created serious exposure. He ordered the lawsuit expanded anyway. The next morning, I was served with a petition asking the court to remove me as trustee of the employee shares. He had thrown me out of his home. Now he wanted to strip away the votes that let me protect the people whose labor had paid for that home. His petition claimed I had used the trust for personal revenge, damaged family relationships, and interfered with a lawful acquisition. Our response didn't discuss my anger, the slap, or the humiliation at the penthouse. It contained payroll records, maintenance payments, insurance renewals, client retention reports, board minutes, audit findings, and proof that normal operations had continued under my authority. Employees submitted statements explaining that I had prevented layoffs, protected benefits, and kept aircraft operating safely during the dispute. Pilots described schedules remaining compliant. Mechanics confirmed no inspection had been delayed. Dispatchers documented that client deposits and emergency plans were protected. The trust existed for those people, and their evidence showed I had used it exactly as my grandmother intended. Derek provided sworn testimony about the arranged proposal, the hidden acquisition plan, and the personal guarantee his father had expected me to sign, and authenticated the emails connecting the wedding announcement to lender approval. The court refused to give my father immediate control of the trust. The judge found no reason to replace a trustee whose decisions had protected the employees named in the agreement. Facing a longer fiduciary case and possible personal liability connected to the false signature, my father returned to settlement negotiations. This time he signed. He resigned as chairman, sold a portion of his shares at an independently appraised value, and agreed to repay documented company expenses. I didn't force him into poverty. He received a fair payment, reduced by liabilities, repayment obligations, and legal costs. Enough for a comfortable life, but not enough to preserve the lifestyle he'd supported through unrestricted access to company money. My parents accepted an off-market offer for the penthouse to satisfy the bridge loan before foreclosure proceedings advanced. My mother lost her leadership role at the foundation after its governance review. Whitney resigned from Hayes Atlantic Aviation, and without her salary, vehicle, travel account, and benefits, filed for personal bankruptcy. Months later, she accepted an event coordinator position in Tampa. For the first time, working somewhere applause didn't arrive before the work. Russell lost the acquisition and several maintenance contracts that depended on it. Derek left his father's company. We remained respectful, but there was never a romance between us. He had helped expose the truth, and that was enough. Nathan stayed beside me, but I didn't turn marriage into the prize at the end of my story. My victory wasn't being chosen by a better man. It was choosing my own life without asking permission. The board approved a new name for the company, Atlantic Flight Management. I removed Hayes, because no family should confuse its surname with permanent ownership of other people's labor. The 15% employee trust remained intact. We introduced transparent expense policies, independent approval rules, and a profit-sharing program tied to safety, client retention, and company performance. I sent my father, mother, and sister a formal notice requiring all future communication to pass through counsel. My mother mailed one personal letter. I returned it unopened. My father left a voicemail saying he hoped I would eventually understand why he had acted as he did. I deleted it. Understanding his motives would never make his choices acceptable. At the company relaunch, I stood before pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, client service teams, and administrators instead of Miami society guests. I told them leadership did not mean owning another person's choices. It meant accepting responsibility for the consequences of your own. I never mentioned my family by name. After the event, I changed my phone number. My father said he had no daughter, so I stopped trying to prove him wrong. I removed his name from the company, changed my number, and built a life he could no longer control. They lost the penthouse because they treated people like assets. I kept the business because I understood that loyalty without respect is only obedience. I never spoke to them again.